removal of the old coilovers and installation of the ground controls. So what we're looking at right now is I've got the whole front end of the car up in the air supported by a jack stand at the front subframe. Strut has been unbolted at the top. Basically the camber plate's unbolted from the shock tower. I've got this jack under here that's just for positioning purposes only. The car itself is held up by that red jack stand under the subframe in the front. Sway bar drop link has been disconnected, and we're about to remove the tie rod. So this is the outer tie rod end. I'm not replacing the center. And then additionally I've taken the rotor off because we're going to replace the wheel bearing here. Now comes what is inevitably the most fun part of any suspension job on, I would say, pretty much any car, especially one that is not brand new. So we're trying to remove the tie rod, the outer tie rod ball joint from the hub assembly here. What we have here is a Harbor Freight, it's not really a pickle fork, it's a ball joint separator tool, and it goes together like this, and there's a pin that goes through it, and basically you tighten down on that bolt there, and that separates it apart. So what I usually do is I separate it into two halves, and I take the lower half and I install it onto the ball joint like that. And by install, I mean very gently encourage it with this hammer. And when you install this, it's probably going to tear your boot for the ball joint, which is why I encourage you to replace the outer tie rod at the same time as you're doing this, because that way you don't care. Now, one of the things about ball joint separator tools is however much torque you think you can apply without the tool breaking, you're going to need about, I don't know, 10 times as much torque as that to get it to actually come loose. And when it does come loose, it usually sounds like the car has exploded. So there you go. That's how it comes apart. You're like, what did I break? Did the tool explode? And best I can tell, I didn't break anything. So now that we got the ball joint out of the tie rod end, I removed the tie rod end, removed the sway bar drop link there. And on this one, as soon as I undid the pinch bolt for the split part here that holds the strut, it actually fell right away from the strut, which is great. So now I'm using the 18mm socket and breaker bar on the 4 bolts that are holding the wheel bearing in. So basically I'm putting my left foot here on the end of the knuckle, kind of hub assembly to keep it counter torqued while loosening the bolts up. Again, they've all got that dry Loctite on them, so they're pretty tight. You do want to make sure that you don't damage the wire here for the ABS wheel speed sensor. So I just wanted to show you the back side of the wheel bearing real quick. You see those 4 bolts there and the wheel speed sensor. We'll undo those 4 bolts and basically the wheel bearing will just pull straight out. This is what the hub looks like with the wheel bearing removed. You can see the wheel speed sensor there on the right. But again, there's just 4 bolts that you get to from the back side. They're 18mm hex bolts. Once I got the 4 bolts out, I removed the old wheel bearing. I just gave it basically a whack with a mallet. Got the new one here. The left and right side wheel bearings are the same, but the bolts themselves are not symmetrical in that they only go on in one way. So for example, if you try to put it on like this way, you'll see that these bolts don't line up with the hub. So there's only one way they go on, so you just kind of move it around until you figure it out. It's definitely where you want to use the new bolts. If you're curious, there's the part number 31121093843 axle hub mounting bolt. First one's the hardest one, basically. Get it lined up and pick a hole to drop the bolt through. Alright, so now I've got all 4 pretty snug. We're going to try to get our 75 foot-pounds. And I can tell So that little chrome socket looking thing sticking out the back is actually the Schwaben spreader tool. And originally I thought I would basically just put it on the end of a breaker bar because it's 1/2 inch drive. and put it in the gap and twist. That's not really the way this tool works. So what I did is I took it just by itself, placed it in the gap, pounded it in with the mallet a couple of times, attached the breaker bar, turned it 90 degrees, which is what spreads it, and then I pulled the breaker bar back out, gave a couple more taps, make sure it stayed in place. Then I loaded the strut into basically the little the holder part there, and then easily, gently fed it up with the jack up into the holes in the strut tower. This is another one of the tricky parts, is getting the strut to seat down into the hub. So you can see the unpainted part is visible through the brake dust shield. That's how much more we have to get it to seat. If you try to force it, it won't go. But if you use the spreader tool to keep it spread and you keep it aligned and gently use the floor jack to raise basically the hub up into the strut, it will go. And you just have to kind of work the strut back and forth. So I want to try to demonstrate that now. Basically, just slowly jack with the handle, and then once you get a little tension on it, work it back and forth. Just see if it slid down a little bit there. And the main part is just keeping it aligned. The sway bar bracket is a good thing to hold on to here to get some leverage on the hub, and just keep working it back and forth like that and putting more tension on it, and eventually it'll slide all the way down. The toughest part is when you first get it started, because it wants to get in there askew, if you will, and then it really won't seat no matter how much pressure you put on it. So just keep doing that and just keep jacking it up until you see all of the unpainted part disappear. And then you heard it just now, it's seated all the way. So once you're seated all the way, then you can put your pinch bolt back in. And pinch bolt comes in from the aft end of the car, 16mm head on that. When you install it, make sure that before you put the nut on, so this is what I did on the other side, the nut, which is an 18mm nut, captures this little bracket for the ABS wire. So make sure that you install that under the nut before you tighten it all down, or you'll have to take it all out and do it all over again. Which is what we moved on to the back now. Back should be easier, but it's not. What we've done so far is we've removed a lot of the interior, which there's a lot of write-ups online about that. But basically you have to remove the parcel shell out of the back so that you can get to the 3 bolts that hold the strut in the top. Basically you take those 3 nuts off, and that allows the strut to fall down. Unfortunately, the issue we have now is that you can't really get the strut out. So having tried this a few different ways now, I can say for sure that the method I recommend is removing the fender liner, which isn't that bad, but not unbolting that control arm there. Basically on the passenger side here, you have to undo the gas fill. And then on the driver's side, there's the evap, which is just one little 10mm plastic nut. So you can move the little expansion tank type thing just enough to get some clearance. So with the fuel fill down out of the way here, that gives me a little bit more room to maneuver the strut. Now on this side, it makes it pretty dang easy. It just comes right on out. So a trick you can do to make this easier is, and ground control actually leaves it untightened for this reason, is spin the perch all the way down to the bottom, and then because there won't be any spring tension, you can actually compress the whole strut by hand. And because it's a gas filled damper, it's going to want to expand, but it's going to do so kind of slowly. So if you're smart and you're dexterous, you can get it up there before it expands. It makes it a heck of a lot easier than it was coming out. And then just kind of walk it in like that. And you see it's so short when it's compressed like that, it's very easy to get it in place, and then it kind of slowly expands up. Just looking up into the bottom of the shock tower from underneath the car. And you just get it lined up about the best you can. There it is, so it just slid into place. And it'll actually kind of hang there a little bit. And then we're going to go up into the inside of the car and get one of these nuts started before the whole thing falls out. All right, so this is the bolt, 21 millimeters, little washer that the ground control kit comes with. So to get it to line up now, you're gonna have to first pass the bolt into the back side of the damper, and then you're gonna need to actually press down on the suspension a little bit, but it's easier just to compress the damper up. So again, you've got the spring perch all the way down, so you can just compress it up by hand, and it's got that little shoulder part that goes right in there. And once the shoulder part goes in, it's pretty much centered up, and you'll be able to get the bolt started with your fingers. Before you put the car back together, you're going to want to adjust this up. So again, spinning this perch upwards, and actually is labeled right here, it says up to the right, will increase your ride height. Once you've got it set in position you want, I'm going to use a Allen key, I think it's 5 millimeter, and tighten up this little set screw right there until the perch doesn't move. Now as far as where to set it to, I don't really know. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to make sure the spring makes contact. I'm going to give it a little bit of preload, and then I'm going to set it there. And then once we set the car back on the ground and drive around a little bit, we'll be able to tell about how high it is and then go from there. Of course, to really get it right, you need to quarter balance it with scales.